Welcome to Kenny's Concepts, where the beauty of knowledge is our passion. On this channel, we share useful insights and tips to help you on your professional journey. If you haven't already, kindly like, share, and subscribe. So I'm super happy to be joined by two friends of mine, Stephen Price and Chris Miller, both of which have extensive experience in their own professional and personal development journeys, which they're going to be sharing right now. So this video series will touch on topics relevant to millennials and speak to success tips and failures and give some insight into how millennials can actually chart their path to professional and personal development success. So I'm going to kick it off now to Chris to introduce himself and let us know what's going on.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for teeing that up, and thank you for having me here. For me, success is something that I'm still on a path to uncovering everything that it means. But I think one of the first things that people have to remember about success is you have to be honest about yourself, about who you are as a person, what you value. I think that's really where it starts. It's if you don't know yourself and if you aren't comfortable with yourself, then you need to work on that first. People that aren't healthy, that are inherently focused on success, even if they do get success, it's built up on a shoddy foundation, and it can lead to unfavorable outcomes for everybody, right? It's with success comes power. That's something that people need to understand, is that yes, you could get success overnight, you could get success, it could take you years of blood and sweat, but when it does happen, you have a responsibility, and I think that's the other thing too that people tend to neglect is that there's a responsibility that comes with it. We have an obligation to help people that are like-minded, people in other cultures that are going through the same issues that we are, that are plagued by the same issues that we are, to help lift everybody out of unfavorable situations, and onwards to prosperity. That's really it.
Nice. Stephen, what are your takes?
Well, my takes is, the first thing you need to do when you're thinking about success is you need to define what success is to you, right? When we generally tend to think of success, we have this very overarching view of success, right? When you look at a person that you think is successful, let's say somebody that everybody thinks is successful, Oprah, right? Everybody will look at Oprah and be like, Oprah is a successful person. But Oprah has also her things that she is failing in. Things that she would like to be successful in, but she's failing in. Everybody knows about Oprah's issue where she's been she's been battling with weight loss for a very long time, right? So it depends on what you use as your measures of success. Because Oprah to herself, she might see herself, and no, I don't know Oprah, so I can't speak for her.
Neither
but, right?
do I.
Yeah. So it depends on what you're using as your measure, because some people could look at Oprah and be like, Oprah is a failure, right? As ridiculous as that sentence sounds, if your measure is the fact that Oprah was not able to lose the weight that she wants to lose, right? That could be something that could be like, say she's a failure. But that's not the metric that we're using as a society to judge Oprah. As a society, we're using her riches to judge success. And as a society, when we think of success, we generally think of riches, which I think is a very narrow view, and not a view that we should use to judge ourselves, right? I think when you're thinking of successes, you look at the small successes that you've had in your life, and success is not this big, like this area that you get to, like you can go from point A to point B, and when you get to point B, that's success, right? Success is just the little stops on the way to while you're living your life, right? You could be, if you cook a meal properly, that's a small success that you celebrate, and then you keep celebrating those small successes, and that will get you into a place where you're able to move on to the bigger and bigger successes. So I think the key when you're thinking about success is to first define what success means to you, and not get lost in what everybody else is defining as success.
Nice, nice. And a big point that Stephen raised that we need to consider is that a lot of the times we benchmark ourselves against you know, all these big mega stars and professionals and huge people that are worth billions of dollars. But a lot of the times we need to reflect on our own successes, reflect on the successes of our brothers, and realize that day by day we're making significant strides to actually bettering our lives. So another big topic that, you know, really comes back and is really pertinent to us is the comparison between Gen X, us as millennials, and Gen Z. A lot of people say that millennials are way ahead of our Gen X counterparts, which are our parents effectively. How do you guys feel about that? Chris?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant topic because it doesn't matter where you fall, you know, along the scale. You know, Gen X people have to communicate with Gen Y people, Gen Z people. We have to relate to each other, and I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that, you know, we're living in a world that's so variable. Every single part of our world is at our fingertips, A, and B, those fingertips, what's accessed by those fingertips, they change. It changes day in, day out. There are different approaches, there are different, you know, mechanisms that enable us to really tap into more than, you know, we ever thought was humanly possible. You know, so, you know, I'm going back to you know, kind of what we were saying earlier is, you know, there's so much power in what we have, you know, available to us today, and we need to be aware. I think there's a social responsibility for that falls amongst each one of us that use these tools that we call technology, that we so lovingly embrace. There's a social responsibility that comes with it that I think, you know, people oftentimes neglect, and, you know, that it sets up the wrong tone, right? And, you know, it takes them off course. It takes them, you know, on a track that they're not really focused on what they really want to do. They're focused on what, you know, is the shiniest, or what's, you know, what they think will get the most likes, right? They do it for the love, right? But they don't really, you know, it's like they just do it for the likes, right? They don't do it for the love. They don't do it for the right reasons. So, you know, I think there's just another thing with just not getting caught up, not being distracted, knowing what you really want to focus on, knowing yourself, and you know, knowing, you know, it's obviously going to happen. We all get distracted. We're only human. But knowing what you can do to get yourself out of that, to snap yourself out of it and recalibrate, right? To really focus on what you actually want to do.
Cool. So fundamental to that, and a big takeaway is that regardless of the generation that you fall into, everything remains the same, right? The same issues, the same opportunities exist, and we have to broadly apply that throughout, no matter where you are, right? And there's not much difference. The fundamentals of success exist and remain the same. Stephen, let's hear your point.
Well, when you think of you know, the different challenges that each generation faces, you know, as millennials, we have the unique position where we're on the cusp of like the greatest technological boom that the world has ever seen, right? Things that were in there that were very useful and very relevant 10 years ago, they're not relevant now, right? When you look at it, we're probably the only generation who has seen, like, compact discs didn't exist, they came in, and now they're on their way out. Yeah. Right, that's a perfect example of, you know, how fast things are changing in our generation, and like that's been in like 15 years, right? And then when you look at the previous generation, you know, they have had to experience things that we haven't had to experience. We haven't been through a war, you know, we haven't had to survive a war, we haven't had to survive the Great Depression, any of those type of things where, you know, affected them differently. Now, what I will say is that for us, you know, there's a little bit of a challenge, whereas our earning power, the power that we have, shouldn't say earning power, but our compensation, right? When you think about 9 to 5 relative to the house, right? The generation before us, they had the dream of, you know, you go to work and you buy your house, and, you know, that is your thing of success, right? But at that time, your salary was more than enough to allow you to purchase a house successfully, right? All you need to do is just save a little money and you go, and the house is affordable. Now house prices are going through the roof, right? The average millennial cannot afford to buy a home. So now we have to think of different ways in which we're able to make money, which is separate and apart from the way our parents did it. Now, luckily, you know, as I said, we're on the cusp of this technological boom. So we have all these tools at our fingertips that we can use to try to make a little extra money that our parents didn't have. So it's about like leveraging those differences and understanding that, you know, every generation had their challenges that they're to overcome. These are our challenges and we need to find the best way to overcome them.
That was awesome. So we had one insight that's showing us the similarities between the generations. Then we have another that's showing us the differences and the need to leverage both the similarities and differences to excel given our own circumstances and what exists in our own lives, and that's amazing. And before we go into anything further, I'd like Chris and Stephen to introduce themselves a bit and kind of let the audience know who they are and what they represent.
So thank you, Paul. Pleasure to be here as a fellow Jamaican and as a fellow Campionite, I should say, Paul.
No one knows what Campion is.
No one knows what Campion is. So Campion is our high school back home in Jamaica. Yeah, that's what it is. Big up Campion.
So I think from us, we've come a long way. And I think from, when we look back at our days, when we were, young high school youths, as you say in Jamaica, we're wide-eyed. We were, full of hope, still full of passion, and I think looking, I guess reconciling the reality now, it's like you realize that, how far we've come, right? So I think one thing that, is always important to me is that, I always do something that I feel that is valuable to me, right? Value is super important. So if I don't get value out of something, then there's basically no point in me doing it. The other thing is, I have to feel excited about it. How do I gauge or measure my level of excitement? If I lose sense of time, right? That's an easy measure for me to gauge my level of passion for something. So I just implore all of you guys to to really introspect, look at yourself and understand what it is, what are the things that you like to do, the activities that you like to take part in that are really important to you. That's the way I've kind of lived my life. So I've done, I've been on many entrepreneurial pursuits, and I figure that at this rate, I'm not gonna stop, right? So I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. Long story short.
Awesome. Stephen.
My name is Stephen Price, as Paul so stated. For me, I'm more along the creative side than the entrepreneurial side. So I'm a stand-up comedian. I also do lots of comedy around the city. For me, I need a creative outlet, right? That is my thing. Like for me, my vision of success is something that allows me to do the things that I like to do, right? So anytime I have the freedom to do what I like to do, whether it is learning how to DJ or learning salsa dancing or performing stand-up or putting on a show here, whatever the thing is, that is what makes me tick. And if I'm in a situation where I'm doing something that takes that away, that's a problem for me, no matter how much money it's making for me. So it comes back to the point that I was saying earlier about knowing what your measure of success is. That is really what I'm trying to drive home. It's what is it that I want. I came across this quote a long time ago where it said that if you don't have a price, then anything will do, right? And it's a case where if it's a situation where you're always running after money, where money is the thing that you always need, there's always more money to be made, right? So what is the limit? Like, what is the point that you will get to where you're like, okay, this is enough and I can now enjoy my life, as opposed to keep chasing that next high, right? So
awesome. So we have an entrepreneur, we have a creative comedian, both of which awesome in their relative crafts and pursuits. And again, just examples of persons and pursuits that we all can embody in our own lives. At the end of the day, we all can't be the Bill Gates of the world. We all can't be the Warren Buffetts of the world. We all can't be the Oprahs of the world. But around us, there are many examples in our own life, as well as friends, close associates, persons close to us that are achieving and making successful strides in their life. So today, I implore you guys to focus on that. Focus on your own journey. Focus on things that are important to you and get out there and get it done. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay blessed.